Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford. He is the one and only Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. Wes, 3 practices in the books for the 2024 Packers training camp, all non-padded practices to this point, basically practices much like OTAs and minicamp and what we saw in the spring. But I'll just throw it out to you open-ended right here. Through the first 3 practices, what observation is at the top of your list?
The defensive front of the Green Bay Packers is a force to be reckoned with right now. And I know offensively Green Bay is dealing with a lot. They're trying to do different rotations. They obviously don't have Jordan Love through these first 3 practices. But I think the way that defensive line, that front 4 has performed so far, I think they'd give any team, any offense in the league fits right now. I've been so blown away, and they talked about it in locker room yesterday, the idea of being able to pass rush in waves and different combinations you're going to be able to throw at people. Rashawn Gary, as he often does, has just completely shot out of the gate in this camp. I mean, he has been almost unblockable. You look at what the interior defensive line, Devontae Wyatt, I think has been really disruptive so far. Carl Brooks had some good pass rushes in practice on Wednesday. Kenny Clark, Preston Smith, Kingsley Enagbari, the list goes on and on and on of these defensive linemen. And so many guys listening to them talk in the locker room this week, mentioning just the excitement that they feel. And again, they're not trying to bury anything that's been in the past, but the idea, especially for a guy like Wyatt, where he feels like he's getting more back to his roots as a pass rusher, as a guy that is just going to get off the ball, win his matchups, and get to the quarterback. This defense, I should say, in the way it's constructed, in the way they've been building this thing, outside of Kenny Clark, Brian Gutekunst has drafted all of these guys.
Yeah.
And now seeing that this scheme that Jeff Hafley's, bringing together with what they have up front, I think it's one of the most exciting things that we saw throughout the spring, and now it's carrying over into the summer.
Yeah, a couple of caveats I'll throw into that. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that you're saying. A couple of caveats I'll throw into it. One is that the Packers have been without their starting right tackle, Zach Tom. He's not out there for 11 on 11 yet, and there's been some switching going on. It was Andre Dillard at right tackle with the ones. Now it's been Kadeem Telfort in the 3rd practice. We'll see what happens there going forward. There's a rookie first-round draft pick in the mix in Jordan Morgan, who's making an adjustment from playing tackle in college to playing guard. He's been all of his 11 on 11 snaps, at least that I've seen, have been at right guard, as he is in that competition with Sean Ryan. And Sean Ryan has also been taking some snaps at left guard when Elton Jenkins needs a breather, and that's a bit of a switch for him because all of his playing time last year was at right guard, and switching sides is not exactly easy. So there are those caveats on top of the fact that the pads aren't on yet. I always take the pass rushing thing with a little bit of grain of salt until the pads go on, because I think the pads help offensive linemen. They help in terms of the leverage. It's not to say that defensive linemen don't use the pads for leverage as well, but I think the pads can slow things down a little bit, and slowing things down can help the offensive linemen. So I throw those caveats out there.
Elton Jenkins also didn't practice on Wednesday with a veteran rest day.
That's right. He took a veteran rest day. So Sean Ryan actually pretty much played the entire practice at left guard on Wednesday. But all that being said, you cannot help but be impressed with how Rashawn Gary looks right now. And what it's made me think about is, the old adage that gets talked about quite a bit in this league, that it's the second year back after an ACL injury where a guy is really 100% back to himself. And I think in part that's what we're starting to see with Rashawn Gary here.
Yeah, and I go back to last season and think about just how impressive it was that he made it back as quickly as he did. But the first 5-6 weeks of the season, he was in a pitch count, so to speak. He had 3 sacks against the New Orleans Saints on 23 defensive snaps.
Yeah, in week 2.
And he wasn't getting that type of work. Week 3, but it was the home opener.
Right.
So those are the aspects of this thing I think you have to consider. But more importantly, it goes back to what he said when we talked to him in the offseason. he got back here in April. He remembers seeing the training staff the first time. Basically, that fork in the road where you're not going to go work with the training staff. You're going to get ready. You're going to go practice. You're going to go through the 3 phases. And he's like, I miss that. And if you've been watching any of his videos, the way that he goes about his offseason training, the mindset that he takes, this guy is all football. Everything that he has, every minute in his day is geared towards football. And Mike Smith said it almost 6 years ago now. That when you have a guy that is that physically talented, the former #1 recruit in the country when he went to Michigan, and he has that type of work ethic, those guys do not fail.
Yeah.
And more he's been building up towards this thing. We're still waiting for that like big, massive breakout. But when you look at his numbers, when you look at the quarterback hits, when you look at the pressures, True Media had him down for 63 pressures last season. This guy eats away at a quarterback's internal clock.
Yeah.
And I think also on the other side of this thing, that's valuable work for Rasheed Walker. That's valuable work for Andre Dillard. And when he gets back out there, that's valuable work for Zach Tom, because that's about as good of a defensive end as you're going to see in this league.
Yeah. I liked what you said about Devontae Wyatt too, because it looks to me, and again, this is just a few practices in and whatnot, and Wyatt is nowhere close to his ceiling and the player that the Packers hope he's going to become. But he looks like he is sort of back in a system, a responsibility, a mode, being asked to do things like he was asked to at Georgia, instead of like constantly feeling like he's making this adjustment to doing something new. There's not just because it's now his 3rd year in the league, there's a comfort level that seems to be emerging with Devontae Wyatt that I think is going to serve this Packers defensive front very well as we move into 2024.
And we touched on it briefly on Tuesday, but the extension with Kenny Clark, yes, Kenny is an exceptional football player, and he's a 3-time Pro Bowler, and he's done so much on the field. But I was talking with Wyatt about him at his locker on Wednesday, and you could just see how excited he was to be able to continue to work with him, to play with him, because he feels like the growth that he made last year, and certainly you give credit to Jerry Montgomery for a lot of that, but a lot of it was going back to Kenny Clark and asking him about the scheme, asking him about his responsibilities. Those two guys in more of that read and react front combined for 13 sacks last season. Again, you don't want to set expectations too high. You have to go out there and play the games, but when both of these guys are being able to sort of pin their ears back a little bit more and push those guards and those centers backwards, you just wonder what the possibilities are for both of them. Again, there's always going to be a counter to that. There's going to be things they're going to have to take into, making adjustments with. But Devontae Wyatt was brought here because of what he did largely that final season at Georgia. And it took him a couple years to build up to that. I think where we're at right now with him going into year 3, it's a very similar pattern of his growth and maybe seeing if he can take that thing to the next level. Either way, him and Kenny Clark together here for the foreseeable future, I think that's a really formidable duo to round out, obviously, the rest of that deep rotation.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to get at, too. The Packers feel good about what they have depth-wise when you look at a guy like TJ Slayton, now in his 4th year in the league, as a run stopper, a guy that can eat up blockers and, is going to try this, get up the field, more attacking mode on the defensive front. He's been a really, really solid run defender. You don't expect that to change. And in the pass rush, you've got these 2 second-year guys in Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden who can also rotate in. I've been really impressed with Brooks, certainly. He had a really, really strong rookie season, I thought, as a 6th-round pick out of Bowling Green. Coming out of a place like Bowling Green, you're making a bigger jump to the NFL in terms of the competition and whatnot than the guys who are coming from those Power 5 conferences. But Carl Brooks looked like he belonged very, very early on his rookie year, and I think he's one of those guys that the year 2 jump is going to be noticeable, and it's going to make a difference for this Packers front.
We always hear Brian Gutekunst and these GMs and these scouts talk about how when you have a guy that didn't maybe face the top caliber competition week in and week out, you want to see them dominate at that level. What stands out to me in particular with Carl, it's not even just necessarily the production, it's the swagger with him. He played at Bowling Green. He had some big game performances in non-conference action, but it's when he got into this stage where it all just seems like football for him. Like there's nothing there that makes you think that okay, he was a really good MAC player. We'll see what happens in the NFL. No, man, if you strip away the college from the bio, I think you'd think this kid played at any, major Power 5 conference in the country.
Yeah.
And then the other, give credit to Colby Wooden too, because and he's, it's tough until these pads come on, but the offseason program, he put on more weight. To me, looked more like a defensive lineman last year. Last year, standing next to Lucas Van Ness, they almost both look like edge rushers. This is a guy that has fluctuated in his weight a little bit, but now he's back more in that 285, 290 range. And it seems like that made a difference for him as well in the offseason. I was in the locker room on Wednesday, and Jonathan Ford was walking through, the 7th rounder from 2 years ago. Just a massive human being as well. Packers, and Matt LaFleur touched on it, they're as deep as they've probably ever been, at least in this era of defensive line play, and especially when you factor in the edge rushers and the different combinations they can run. There are so many different avenues for this defensive front to succeed. You have to do it. You have to execute it. Words can only do so much. But my goodness, Michael, I think that's a group right there that definitely can push the pace.
Yeah, I know we started this discussion talking about Rashawn Gary, and we haven't really talked too much about Preston Smith and Lucas Van Ness and Kingsley Enagbari. But I'll just close with this, that taking away the defensive ends and the edge rushers, the interior defensive linemen, defensive tackles, whatever you want to call them, I think this is as strong and deep a group as I've seen in Green Bay that I can recall in quite some time. Whether you're talking 4-3 or 3-4 base, it doesn't matter. The interior defensive line, that group they have right now, I think it's really impressive. And if you're not going to want to take Kenny Clark off the field, you're going to want to get Devontae Wyatt, as many snaps as he can handle in a lot of respects. But that being said, when you have these other guys on the interior where the game can be so physical and so exhausting, and when you have those opportunities to rotate guys in and not take such a significant step back, I think that really bodes well for these guys.
And it helps Kenny too, because that has been for 8 years, and definitely 6, the cat and mouse game of figuring out when to utilize him.
Yeah.
And I think it's been unfair sometimes, that either the gas tank is a little bit more empty on third downs, or he just doesn't get as many of those opportunities, because he's been consistently the Packers' best run defending defensive tackle. I mean, you see the statistics, Mike. I believe, I didn't come up with this paperwork coming into this thing, but it was somewhere around, I think, 0.8 or 1 yard per carry fewer when Kenny was on the field against the run last season.
Doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
He has been such a linchpin there. So, yeah, if a TJ Slayton emerges as a guy that can be your nose tackle in those situations, or your one tech that can handle, those type of double teams, if you can have a guy like Carl Brooks help out on third downs, it just makes Kenny Clark that much more dangerous, and that's the balance that Green Bay's been trying to strike for several years now.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I will say, shifting gears a little bit, that has really jumped out to me in these first 3 practices is the competition going on at safety. We talked about it was going to be a big story from the beginning. Who's the guy who's going to be lining up next to Xavier McKinney, lining up alongside McKinney when the Packers are playing the Eagles in Brazil in week 1. And there's a steady rotation going on right now with Javon Bullard, with Evan Williams. Anthony Johnson Jr. is getting himself in the mix. And now these last 2 practices on Tuesday and Wednesday, Evan Williams got an interception in each practice. Anthony Johnson Jr. got an interception in each practice. Xavier McKinney is he's the new guy, but yet he's clearly the leader of that room and the leader of that bunch. And those guys are following him, certainly with all the knowledge and everything that he's able to share. But man, this safety competition, this could end up going all the way through the month of August before we know who the starter actually is.
Shoot, Matt LaFleur said it could go into September. I mean, he said, there's a possibility that multiple of these guys could be playing back there, especially with the slot versatility of a guy like Bullard, or even some of the stuff that Evan Williams has done in the past. It's not just about, okay, who lines up against next to Xavier McKinney. It's about, hey, how can these defensive backs help us in our sub packages? And I think with Bullard and Williams, what you like the most about those two together is they offer such different ways of sort of succeeding at the safety position. I mean, I've said it numerous times now. I watch Williams out there. He reminds me a lot of Micah Hyde, not just his build, not just the fact he's wearing 33, but just an extremely intelligent player that just seems to know where the ball is going to be and how he needs to get there.
Yep.
In Bullard, this is a guy that, like Quay Walker, like Devontae Wyatt, like Eric Stokes, played football at the highest level at Georgia, won 2 national championships, played 2 different positions, started at 2 different positions.
Right.
And so while these guys are rookies, these are guys that played a lot of football next to Xavier McKinney. And then McKinney, again, is sort of the thing that is going to bring all of this together. I mentioned that story. It was the biggest offseason play that the Packers made in the practices that were open to the media. Xavier McKinney's out there for the first snap. He goes trotting off because you're watching your veteran work. Bo Melton goes for a 75-yard touchdown, the exact play that McKinney leaves the field. I mean, he is and asking Eric Stokes about this on Wednesday, he is the guy that is making sure that people are where they're supposed to be. He's the guy that's communicating the assignments on the back end and is vocal. So when the Green Bay Packers went into this offseason, more than anything, more than offense, defense, or special teams, they knew they had to make repairs at safety. They've done that. And now we have to see how it all looks come Brazil. But they're in a much better spot right now than if you're just wondering, okay, well, let's throw in somebody else and see what happens. No, all these guys are earning their playing time.
I think what's been most impressive about the 2 rookies, Javon Bullard, 2nd-round pick out of Georgia, Evan Williams, 4th-round pick out of Oregon. I think what's been most impressive is that, while they've been rotating and each getting their cracks with the ones, and sometimes they're in the box, sometimes they're playing deep, and Xavier McKinney is challenging himself in the same way where, some plays he's deep, some plays he, moves up into the box depending on the call, the personnel, the offense. But these 2 rookie draft picks, they've really picked up the system. You're not seeing a lot of confusion out there. You're not seeing missed assignments and guys immediately talking to each other after the play because, this or that. And it was interesting. It's been interesting over the course of time talking to both of them about picking things up. Williams, I remember telling me back during the rookie minicamp when I asked him about, the playbook and trying to get acclimated to, an NFL defense. And he says, well, I played for, 4 different defensive coordinators and, my time at Fresno State and then at Oregon. So he's used to learning a new system. He's got his own process. He knows he's been through this before. Then you ask Javon Bullard kind of the same thing about how he's picking things up. And his answer, he's picking it up much, in the same fashion with the same speed that Williams is, but his answer is completely different. His answer is Jeff Hafley's a DB guy. So was Kirby Smart at Georgia. They build their defenses with, in some senses with the DBs in mind in terms of how you process things. And he said the similarities in that regard have made it pretty easy for him to make this transition to Hafley's defense because it really is not about the concepts. It's just about the terminology. It's what do you call something? And he has to forget the terminology from Kirby Smart's defense at Georgia and just apply Hafley's terminology here in Green Bay. My point is both of these guys have picked things up pretty quickly, and that's how you get reps with the ones in training camp is because the coaches trust that the calls and the playbook, and now it's just a matter of seeing who performs.
And the motivation that group feels. I mean, even listening to Wyatt talk about it, I mean, they know it's Green Bay, Wisconsin. They know it's quarterback capital of the United States almost with the way they've developed guys here the last 30 years. But defensively, they feel like they can be a team that is the one that sets the tone for their football team. And they're chasing that right now. And, dude, come week 1, come that game against the Eagles, there's going to be 11 defenders on the field. There's going to probably be 4, 5, maybe 6, probably 4 or 5 defensive backs. But at the end of the day, it's about what you have, how that group is pushing each other, and then when the injuries come, when the adversity comes, who can you turn to?
Yeah.
And you look at last season, especially at safety, it got a little precarious at times. Again, we're 1 week into this practice of training camp and a few months into what this 2024 season is going to look like. But I think the Green Bay Packers have to feel good about where they're sitting right now, considering all the investment they've made into that position.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll take care of a little sponsor business here, Wes, so I don't forget. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, $3.65. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right, another thing I wanted to touch on, because actually shortly before we came in here and turned the cameras and the microphones on, you posted a story on Packers.com with regard to AJ Dillon. Now, on the health end of things, Marshawn Lloyd, the third-round draft pick at running back, he has not practiced yet because of a hip injury. We did see Jaden Reed, the second-year receiver, back on the practice field from his toe injury, limited at least initially, but he's back, and there aren't a whole lot of major concerns with regard to that toe. But getting back to running back, AJ Dillon went about this past offseason, not just in terms of, signing a contract to come back to Green Bay after his rookie deal expired and all that. That was all part of his process. But he went about this offseason in terms of his body and his preparation in a very different way, and you got some of the details on that.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to listen to AJ and then, listen to where last year was a problem for him. Like, he went through the neck injury, he broke the thumb, not the type of season you want heading into unrestricted free agency. And listening to what his thoughts were and how he approached it and the vision he had for what he wanted 2024 to be, again, this is a guy that already kept himself in really good shape. He was at 250 at 8-9% body fat, but he thought and he challenged himself, how can I get better? How can I make sure that when I look back on this thing 10 years from now, I know, okay, whatever happens, I gave it my best shot. He cut down on the carbs. He intook more grass-fed beef. He traded in all the soda for water. He started running the steps with a weight vest like Jared Bush used to do out in the Stadium Bowl at Lambeau Field. He got a Whoop band that showed him how much he's sleeping, what his respiratory rate was, all the different things that he's doing. And when he came back to the Packers during negotiations in March, when he went back and visited a couple other teams and talked to some other teams, he said, I want to play at a Pro Bowl caliber level in 2024. He's not saying he's going to make the Pro Bowl. He just said, whatever role you want me in, if you want me as a running back, if you want me as a special teams player, whatever you want me to do, I'm going to give it everything I had. The phrase he kept saying over and over again was 2 yards, 2,000 yards, 2 million yards. Whatever it is that it ends up being, he's comfortable with that. So with all the work he did physically, as he said, what he feels like is he actually chased down the part of the game he was trying to master mentally, which was taking out the thought process into anything, taking out the worry, taking out the pressure. He knows there's pressure. The football is pressure. Marshawn Lloyd got drafted. Manuel Wilson is there. Packers they brought in Josh Jacobs. Like, it is a business where you can never get complacent. But in terms of executing what his assignment is, AJ Dillon feels more at peace right now than he's ever felt in his NFL career. In addition to that, he accomplished a lot off the field. Him and his wife, Gabrielle, they started their own foundation, the Dillon Family Foundation.
Started their own family
with Trey a year ago, too.
Yeah.
He said it's been only 5 years, but the growth that he's made as a man, he hopes to now channel that into being growth as a player. And talking with Josh Jacobs a little bit about it, too, he said, this is a guy that, even for me, a guy that has been a rushing champion, a 2-time All-Pro, how helpful AJ has been in getting him acclimated to Green Bay. So there's a lot of levels to this, but at the end of the day, yeah, again, as Matt LaFleur said at the podium earlier this week, the best he's ever looked, hands down, and certainly mentally, I think he's as clear as he's ever been.
It's interesting because, you and I get all the questions in Insider Inbox, and one that's been very frequent throughout the spring and early summer since the Packers drafted Marshawn Lloyd, which is after Josh Jacobs was signed, after AJ Dillon re-signed with that special fifth-year deal. A lot of fans were kind of trying to write off AJ Dillon in a sense and just say, well, it looks like he's going to be the odd man out. Like, is he going to be the surprise veteran cut that everybody seems to wanting to try to pinpoint like well in advance? And I don't know how this thing is going to shake out. But what I tried to emphasize in answering those questions is that, look, you have to look at this from a very realistic perspective. Josh Jacobs is new to Green Bay. Marshawn Lloyd is new to Green Bay and this offense. Emmanuel Wilson was an undrafted rookie last year who missed a ton of time. AJ Dillon is a guy who has been in this offense for multiple years. He has done the 2-minute stuff. He's done the hurry up stuff. He knows all of the pass protection calls to protect your franchise back there. Even if AJ Dillon is only going to play 10 to 15 snaps a game, and I have no idea, I'm just pulling a number out of a hat, but even if AJ Dillon might only be playing 10 to 15 snaps a game, I think he can be a really, really valuable piece to what's going on here. And I don't think that can be dismissed just because there are some younger guys who are showing a lot of promise and certainly, may have both, I'm talking about Lloyd and Wilson, may have futures in Green Bay. But right now in 2024, there's a lot of value in having A.J. Dillon not only in that running back room, but on that field.
Absolutely. And just for anybody out there that wants to have this conversation with their friends so you don't sound stupid, A.J. Dillon's the only one that plays special teams right now out of this group. With Patrick Taylor now in San Francisco, A.J. Dillon is the guy that works on the punt coverage unit. He's the guy that is back as one of the guys. Well, he was, however it looks now, he was historically a guy that could play in the posse back on kickoff returns.
Yeah, as a blocker.
As a blocker.
Yeah.
Right now, just where it's at, I mean, Emmanuel Wilson I don't think, played special teams last year in a regular season game. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Marshawn Lloyd is now coming into this thing for the first time. Some things have been floated about maybe him helping out in kickoff returns, but A.J. Dillon is a guy that can be a 4-core player for you in that phase too. Just the way he's built at 245 pounds. I mean, A.J. Dillon brings a lot to this football team, and I understand the pressures that go along with playing a skill position and how everybody looks at the numbers, they look at the touches, and they look at the touchdowns, and that's what they equate to what is a good football player. But as Matt LaFleur said, I remember sitting at the table with him in Orlando weeks after he was signed, that AJ was re-signed, and he made sure to mention that was a pivotal signing for them. He came back on a very unique contract, which I think was somewhat spurred on by his desire to be here in Green Bay, to stay in this community. But all that being said, this is a guy that I think at the end of the day, you want to have on your roster, and you want to have him for a full season. And if he can truly be able to put the injury stuff behind him from last year, if he can, get the body thing tuned in the way it appears that he has, there's still a lot out there for him too at 26 years old.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, with that, we're going to call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. When we're back for our next show early next week, we'll have another 3 practices in the books because the team is going to practice Friday, Saturday, Sunday before the next off day from the field on Monday. So we will look forward to that and discuss things at that point. But for Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We've got all your coverage of training camp on Packers.com. Check it out, and we will see you next time.